So a week or so, or a few months ago, I was walking around the lake. And as I was walking around the lake, I noticed a building that I had seen hundreds of times before, but that particular day, I saw it differently. Perhaps you've seen this building as you've walked around the lake. It looks kind of like this. I would hope you have seen this building at least once or twice. But perhaps you might not be used to seeing it from this angle. Perhaps you walk around the lake backwards and you might look at it about like this when you come around the last corner of the lake. But this morning, I want to give you a different perspective about this building than either one of these two photos. A perspective that's not as easily seen from where we sit. Here's an aerial view of the press, and the little map marker is about where you guys are sitting, about where this room is at. And it's, as I look at this, and as I was walking around the lake, I was thinking about the interesting statistic. I don't know if it's still accurate as it was at one point, but the idea that we are the largest bulk mailer in Idaho. And hey, Warren's giving me the thumbs up that is still correct. I'm sure it was several years prior to the blending, and I'm sure that if it wasn't at that point, it definitely is now with everything being blended at double the workloads for everybody. But I was thinking about this idea that in this building, all of us put together are able to do so much more than what we're able to do on our own. Because if we were to take this picture and just zoom it out a little bit, there we are, right at the very tip of that marker. You have to get up really close, and our building might be a pixel. Might be a little tiny pixel on that screen of our valley here. And it's still amazing to me as I'm looking at that there's no other spot anywhere in that map that puts out as much product, as much mail as we do. It's fascinating to me to just kind of, it baffles my mind. But it gets even crazier than that, and more amazing than that, because if we were to zoom out even more, there we are. The very tip of that marker, the pixel there actually probably covers this entire valley. And what's crazy is that what we do here on a day-to-day basis doesn't just affect where our little dot is. It can affect over here, it can affect down here, it can affect over here. It can affect anywhere that there's people. Anywhere in the entire planet, just from this little building. And it's really not just because there's a building here, it's because you and I are here. And as I'm walking around the lake, as I'm thinking about this idea, a passage comes to my mind. A passage that Paul wrote in 1 Corinthians. It's a little bit of a detour that's sandwiched between him talking about the spiritual gifts, and he takes this detour and he starts talking about the body. So 1 Corinthians 12:14. As you know, the human body is not made up of only one part, but of many. And for the case this morning, we're going to call ourselves the Pacific Press body. The Pacific Press body is not made up of only one part. We're made up of many. Suppose a foot says, I'm not a hand, so I'm not a part of the body. Would that mean it really is no longer a part of the body? Or suppose an ear says, I'm not an eye, so I'm not a part of the body. Would that mean it's really no longer a part of the body? If the whole body were an eye, how could it hear? If the whole body were an ear, how could it smell? If every one of us here worked in pre-press, maybe a lot of things would get done there, but not a whole lot of things would get done anywhere else. Or if everybody worked up in accounting, there might be a bunch of arguing over where the numbers should go and what the numbers should be, but not a whole lot would actually get done. And so we each have a different part in this body. So God put each and every part of the body together as he wanted it. How could it be a body if it only had one part? So there are many parts but one body. There's many parts. There's many, many, many roles that each of us play here. But we are connected as one Pacific Press body. But it gets even more interesting than this, because he continues, and I can't say to a hand, I don't need you. Somebody from product development can't say to the finishing person, I don't need you, because the stuff that they were working so hard on up in the product development area wouldn't get out the door without that finishing person. Or again, the head can't say to the feet, I don't need you. That person up in accounting can't say to the shipping guy, I don't need you, because that accounting guy probably doesn't want to be back in the shipping department packing up boxes all day. And because then the accounting stuff wouldn't get done. We each have a part to play. It continues, the opposite is true. The parts of the body that we think are weaker are the ones that we really need. As I look out here, I see two different types of employees. There's the type of employee that handles and touches the products directly, and then there's the type of employee that helps support those that touch the products directly. We're really one of those two roles when we're here, and one role can't say to the other role, I don't need you. That finishing person can't say to the engineering guys, I don't need you, because as soon as the machine breaks, guess who's one of the most valuable employees? They're sitting right back there. We each are important, and we each have a role. Skipping down a few verses, God's purpose was that the body should not be divided. It's easy to get broken apart into little silos, each person doing their own thing, but that's not what God wants for his body, and that's not what we want for our Pacific Press body. But rather, that all of its parts should feel the same concern for each other. If one part of the body suffers, all the other parts share its suffering. If one part is praised, all the others share in its happiness. You are Christ's body, and all of us here are the Pacific Press body. And each of you is an individual part of it. As I look out here, I see faces, I see people that God has brought here for a specific purpose. Every so often, and it hasn't happened as frequently as it has in the past, but every so often I get a nagging thought in my mind. And it might be implicating for me to say this, but I'm going to say it just in case any one of you out there here in this room have had that thought before. And that's the thought that, well, what I do really isn't that significant. What I do is really just kind of bland and boring. What I do could be done by almost anybody. Like basically, I could easily be replaced. I've had that thought enter my mind. But while that's true to an extent, that's not true because God has brought you here and put you in that specific place, in that specific role for a purpose. And it's a purpose that you might know, but it's also maybe a purpose that you don't know yet. And each one of us in our roles has an amazing part to play as part of this body, because together we can do exponentially more than what any one of us could do on our own. Looking back at this map of the world and where we are, the little tiny speck underneath that pixel, I often wonder about the stories that go out about this place. Some stories come back. Some stories I'm not really privy to. A lot of the stories that come back, I don't have much direct contact with people who either write in or call in and say and share the stories that this magazine or this book was it's kind of wild how it happened, but it came to me in the strangest way, and it had exactly what I needed to hear. Some of you get those stories, and sometimes those stories are shared in the press and print. But I'm positive for that every one of those stories, there's probably hundreds that we're not ever going to hear on this side of heaven. And that's both amazing and challenging, but encouraging for me, because as I imagine walking up in heaven after this whole scene of history is done, and this sin experiment is over, and we're walking along up in heaven, somebody will come up and will share a story about a book, a story about a magazine that they received. Perhaps they didn't even purchase it. Perhaps somebody else purchased it, gave it to somebody else, who then grew old and died, left it in their estate. It went over to somebody else, and through a odd sort of twisted path, it ended up in their hands, and they didn't know what to do with it, but they flipped open the pages, and something hooked them, and it changed their life. Those sorts of stories are stories that you and I have a direct part to play in as we work here. And our little dot on the map has the privilege, as well as the opportunity, as well as the responsibility to help impact every single other dot on this map. And it's an amazing privilege that we've been given as part of this Pacific Press body. Looking back at the close-up view, I want to direct your attention to the lake. It's right out here. We are all really familiar. We've probably all of us have walked around it at least once, if not more than once a day. But as I look at this picture, I see something fascinating. Our building up here is about the same size as our lake. But what's different about our building is that our building puts out materials that spread across the globe, whereas our lake only impacts a small little piece of our valley. Our lake is part of the irrigation system. So water's brought into it, stored, and then released out. And so that intermediate picture where we see all the green, our lake's a little piece of that green. But its influence doesn't spread outside of this valley. But the building's influence spreads out across the world. And the difference between this building and between the lake that we walk around and pay very little attention to is us. You and I, connected, united together, make this building what it is. And as we close out this Monday morning worship, I want to pray with you guys and for all of you guys to really help remind us that we don't work for ourselves. We don't even really work for Dale or for management or for the board. We work as part of Christ's body, part of a grand plan that's way bigger than any one of us could ever imagine. And together we are able to do way more than any one of us could ever do by ourselves. So will you bow your heads with me as we close in prayer? Father, thank you for the opportunity to be a part of something that you're doing. And be with each one of us here today and help keep that perspective in our minds that we each individually have a part to play as part of your Pacific Press body, but as well as your entire church body. And be with us as we leave here. Keep us safe as we work this coming week. And just bless the products that go out from this place, the ones that we've touched or the ones that we've helped support those who have touched them, and just lead us that much closer to you until you return and take us home. We love you. Thank you. Amen.